All right, we are now joined by the pregame, postgame, halftime, and intermission voice of the New York Knicks and Rangers on 98.7 ESPN Radio here in New York. He's also the sports director at News 12 in the Bronx and Brooklyn, and he does some on-air work for the Big East Digital Network. His name is Pat O'Keefe. Pat, thanks for joining the show.
Bob, thanks for having me on the show. How you doing?
Absolutely no problem. Now, I didn't plan on doing much Yankees with Pat here today, but since this morning, the news broke that Aaron Judge has re-signed with the Yankees, 9 years, $360 million, $40 million a year. He basically hit the lottery. Give us a couple thoughts on Judge with the Yankees.
Well, from the Yankees' perspective, given the way that the organization has been run in recent years, it kind of had to be done. Judge so far and away outperformed any reasonable expectations last year that he put himself in this position to cash in however much he wanted. And look, this is going to go down as maybe the greatest example of betting on yourself in sports history. Opening day, Yankees offer him $213.5 million. He goes out, he hits 62 home runs. He wins the MVP. Yesterday, he's named Time Magazine Sports Person of the Year. And he gets an additional 2 years and $147.5 million in salary. So good for him. I don't think it would have been the end of the world had he left, but now that he is back, the fan base, which has been very disgruntled lately, is happy. I don't know that should be a huge factor when putting together a sports franchise, but it is a factor nonetheless. And now it'll be interesting to see what they put around him.
Well, I mean, they're going to make their money back tenfold with this. They made it last year with the home run chase, and the fan base was happy for 5 minutes. They're already complaining we need to do more. We can't bring back the same team. And as a Met fan, I was kind of giddy yesterday, thinking he might be going to the Giants, even though he'd be in the National League. But do you now, real quick on the Jon Heyman thing? You work in newsrooms and everything. How bad is it that Jon Heyman put that tweet out? He was clearly rushing, because he misspelled, he put Arson Judge to begin with, and then he went with Aaron Judge, and then he walked it back. How damaging is that going to be to someone like Jon Heyman?
It's not going to be damaging at the end of the day. You know, Jon Heyman's already well established. It's embarrassing, don't get me wrong. And in my opinion, it's not the first embarrassing thing that Jon Heyman has done in his career. His stance, and he's very selective on what steroid guys he admits to the Hall of Fame and what steroid guys he doesn't admit to the Hall of Fame. When pressured on that, he does not handle the questioning well, which is ironic for somebody who questions other people for a living. So he's embarrassed himself before. This was embarrassing, but he's well established with the Post. He's well established on MLB Network, and I don't think it's a career ender by any stretch of the imagination.
Now, let me ask you, as someone who, you work, you supervise over reporters and stuff like that, why is it so important for him to get it out there first? I mean, I know you break the story, but 30 seconds later, everyone else is going to have it. Does it really matter? I couldn't even tell you who broke this Judge story this morning. Why did they do that? Why do they care so much?
Yeah, I don't know, to be honest, and I don't think it's that important. And like you said, I work in the field, not necessarily in that area. I'm not a newsbreaker. I'm not an insider. I'm a storyteller. I report on the news of the day, add a certain amount of perspective, and tell human interest and feature stories. So that's a large part of what I do. I've never been hung up in who has reported what first, but it's obviously important to people like Heyman, Schefter, Ian Rappaport in the NFL, Woj and Shams in the NBA. I mean, look, every sport has their guys, and it's kind of a cottage industry. But to somebody like me, and I like to think I am a pretty well-established member of the New York sports media, it doesn't make a difference to me at all.
Yeah, I don't think it makes a difference really to anybody but them in their little circles. So now that's the good news for Yankee fans, not so much for the Mets fans. We had our good news earlier last week. Now let's get to the stuff that's not really as good. The tenants at the Garden. Let's start with the Knicks. Listen, they're 11-13. They're 10th in the Eastern Conference. They've lost 3 out of 4. This little homestand that they've had, it's not been real good. They won they play tonight. They play Atlanta. Give me your thoughts on the Knicks as you're around the team every day.
Well, given the schedule that they've played, and until this last week, it's been heavily slanted towards road games and the increased depth in the Eastern Conference. I think at the beginning of the season, if you had said that the Knicks would be 11-13 at this point and on the fringe of the Eastern Conference play-in picture, I think at least I would have thought, yeah, that's a reasonable place to think that they would be. But some of the performances lately have given you reason for concern. Black Friday against the Portland team playing without Damian Lillard. They get up big early, and then they let Jeremy Grant and Anthony Simons explode for 82 points between the two of them. They lose a game they had no business losing on their home floor. Last Saturday against the Dallas team that did not seem like had any interest in playing in the first half. It was a 12:30 game at the Garden. And through the years, we've seen visiting teams come in on a Friday night, enjoy what New York City has to offer, and not be at their best on Saturday at 12 or 12:30. And that seemed to be what was ailing Dallas and Luka Doncic in that game on Saturday. But the Knicks couldn't take advantage. They had a 7-point lead at halftime. They let Dallas hang around. And then Luka and Tim Hardaway Jr. exploded in the third quarter, and the Knicks were embarrassed in the second half. So a couple of individual performances give you reason for concern. Overall, 11-13 is kind of where I expected this team to be. Look ahead for this Knicks schedule, because this next stretch from now basically until about the week leading up to Christmas is huge. You got Atlanta tonight. We're speaking on a Wednesday morning.
Mm-hmm.
Atlanta has some issues going on right now internally. Their star player is not getting along with the head coach. Then you go to Charlotte, which is an abomination. On Sunday, you host Sacramento, much improved, but at home, that's a team that you should win. And then you have 3 interesting road games in a row, 2 in Chicago, and the Bulls have been a mess, and then 1 at Indiana. The Pacers have been a nice surprise, but they're starting to come back to earth, and their early success was a byproduct of their relatively easy schedule. So that's 6 games right there. Can you go 4-2? Can you go 5-1? Can you put yourself in position to try to separate yourself from the back of the play-in tournament and try and make yourself a factor at the front of the play-in tournament? That they have the opportunity to do over these next 6 games in 2 weeks.
I'd say, 4-2 is a stretch, and 5-1 is asking a whole lot from the Knicks.
Well, listen, Charlotte, Chicago, Indiana, and you win 1 game at home. That's 5 games right there.
Yeah, and you know what? And listen, it would have, if Trae Young could have done him a favor and kind of waited 2 days to get into that whole argument with his coach and skipped tonight's game instead of the previous one.
Well, here's a good example of another concerning performance. November 2nd, the Knicks are playing the Hawks. They're up by 22 points in the first half. They let Atlanta back in the game, and then Trae Young gets hit in the face and misses most of the second half, and they still lose the game by 13. So they had their opportunity in November to play the Hawks without Trae for much of the game, and they couldn't cash in on that either. So you never know with this team. The consistency is just, unfortunately, not there, and it's more defensive consistency than offensive consistency. Yeah, and then the other part is the three-point shooting. The three-point shooting is just... It's
atrocious. Bad. It's atrocious. And the defensive inconsistency, it's surprising with a coach like Thibodeau. He's known for it as a defensive coach. A lot of defense is effort. They're ranked 19th in the league with points against. Why doesn't this team play defense? Because when they do play defense, they're a decent defensive team, but they just don't do it on a night-to-night basis.
Well, nobody's playing defense in the NBA this year. The scores are astronomical. Right. It's a combination of just not finding the right mix of guys. Occasionally it is effort, and I cite the second half of that Dallas game on Saturday as an example where effort was an issue. Keep an eye on Quentin Grimes. I've really liked what I've seen from him the last 2 games. Against Dallas, he did a really good job guarding Luka Doncic in the first half. Nobody holds down the NBA's leading scorer for an entire game, but he did a really good job against him. And then the next time he's got to turn around and guard Donovan Mitchell. And Mitchell had one of his worst games of the season. We all thought Mitchell was going to show up at the Garden on Sunday. First game back in his hometown. Obviously, he wanted to come to the Knicks in the offseason. We thought he was going to put on a show. And Quentin Grimes was able to keep him in check. So he's done a really nice job these last 2 games. Now,
Thibodeau seems to have gone. He seems to be grasping at straws a little bit with he now has a new rotation. Evan Fournier can't get on the floor. Derrick Rose is sitting on the bench. Cam Reddish is sitting on the bench, and Cam Reddish was one of his favorites. What is he doing with this new? It looks like a 9-man rotation, I guess it is.
Well, it's for 1 game anyway, so we'll see what he does tonight. For the Cleveland game, he went with a 9-man rotation. He took Reddish. Reddish was really bad. He had a rough game. He's been pretty good this season. he had a particularly rough stretch in the second quarter against the Dallas game, and Thibodeau was very visibly frustrated with him and yanked him off the court in the second quarter. I think that was a byproduct of that. I think he can work his way back in. I think Rose will work his way back in as well. I don't think Tibbs loves playing Rose on back-to-backs, given his injury history and physical condition. And I also think he was looking for a little bit more defensively. And Deuce McBride, and Knicks fans always love the backup point guard or the backup quarterback. Football fans
most popular guy in the city every year.
Oh, of course, So he's not really an offensive threat, but it is a defensive upgrade going from Derrick Rose to Deuce McBride at the point guard position. That worked on Sunday. The Knicks held the Cavs to 81 points, and amazingly, it was the first time all year the Knicks held an opponent to fewer than 100 points. But I don't think that's sustainable. This Knicks team, if they're going to be successful with the bench unit, needs Derrick Rose to be leading it.
I think tonight it'll be a good kind of measuring stick game. They're coming off because the Knicks, what the Knicks do is they beat teams who they're better than, which I guess you have to do. But they very rarely get a surprise win over a team that is better than them. They got one the other night against Cleveland. They have now Atlanta tonight. Atlanta with the infighting, they could probably be vulnerable tonight. What do you think about tonight's game?
I don't know.
Is that the pregame show tonight?
I am, yeah. I'll let you know at 7:00. But you look at. I go back to that. The most disappointing game to me this season was November 25th against Portland. The Knicks had gone on the road, that 5-game Western road trip, where they go 3-2, and they finished with a win at Oklahoma City to kind of avenge one of their uglier losses of the season. Then they come back to New York Thanksgiving week. They have 3 full days off. They're at the Garden. It's a great crowd on that Friday night against Portland, and there's no Damian Lillard. You had a chance to get back above 500, and it was a complete letdown. So that's the problem with the consistency. Every time you think that this team is coming off of a win that you think it can build on, it has a little bit of a letdown. So can they beat Atlanta? Yeah, they've played Atlanta tough for the most part. Even in that playoff series loss, those first 3 games could have gone either way 2 years ago. And I know we refer back to that a lot because that's the Knicks' only playoff opponent in the last decade almost. Regular season games, they've played this team well. So it's certainly a team on their home floor that they could beat. But you always have to caution yourself against the possibility that they're not going to put forth their best effort like they have against Portland, like they did that Sunday matinee against Oklahoma City, because we've already seen that a couple of times this year.
Now, I was a big R.J. Barrett fan coming into last year, this year. Has he taken a step back this year?
Yes, but I don't know that it's a permanent step back. He's historically a slow starter, but it's in December now. Usually by now he's starting to round into form. The fact that he's still struggling and still unable to find consistency is a little concerning. I think it's just a matter of Brunson being here, and it's one of the few negatives, and it's not really a negative, but Brunson has the ball in his hands so much. Randall is still a guy who has the ball in his hands a lot. So Barrett really went the last 2 years from being the second most used guy on the offense to now he's the third guy. So when he has his opportunities with the ball in his hands, what you're seeing him do is tend to force it a little bit. He doesn't have the freedom that he had the last couple of years to put his head down and drive to the basket with as much frequency. And that's the best part of his game. And a lot of times when guys feel that they're not getting as many touches as they want and they tend to force shots up, those forced shots a lot of times come from behind the three-point line. And that's not a strength of his game. Now, he last couple of years turned himself into an adequate three-point shooter, but not to the point where he can be forcing up shots, contested three-pointers. That's not his game. I give him more time. I think he will figure out how to play with Brunson, how to play with Randall, and his history suggests that he will improve.
Yeah, I think he's got potential to be a good player. And the other night, I remember I guess it was a week ago, they were playing when they played Milwaukee, and Grayson Allen hit that dagger three. That was a game they could have won. They had him. They were even with like a minute to go, and then right after Allen hit that three, RJ came down and he missed the three from the wing.
Perfect example.
I just think that's a shot that's got to be hit.
Or not taken.
Or not taken.
They didn't need a three at that point. RJ's not a dribble the ball up court, pull up for three kind of guy. There were 30 seconds left when Allen hit the shot. So you're talking 25 seconds left. You're down by three. You don't need a three-pointer
get a
in
quick
that scenario
two.
unless it's wide open. Get a quick two and then play defense, play the foul game. That was not a good shot at the time. He missed, and they never scored again that night.
Does Thibodeau have to make the playoffs to keep his job?
That's a good question. I wouldn't say definitely. I mean, not making the play-in tournament for the second straight year would be a huge disappointment. I'm not aware of any ultimatums that are on him. Look, the Eastern Conference is a lot better. There's a lot more depth. You look at, right, you got Boston and Milwaukee have separated themselves. Cleveland is, I think, better than a lot of people thought. You still have Miami as a factor. You still have Philadelphia as a factor. That's 6 teams right there. So then you still have to go to
the Nets
Brooklyn,
are playing better.
What the heck they are.
Yeah, but they're playing better. The Nets are playing better.
The team the Knicks are playing tonight, the Hawks, they're above 500, and they have 2 All-Stars in their backcourt. That's 8 teams right there. So tell me, what team are they expected with this personnel? What team are they expected to be better than them?
Yeah, I guess you're right. Yeah, I guess you're right. It's just so frustrating.
When you actually go team by team, of course it's frustrating. But when you go team by team and you're like, all right, well, which team should they be better than? I can't tell you that they should be better than any of those 8 teams.
No, I can't even argue with you on that because you're right, and I was actually I work at Rikers, and I was working with the young adults the other day, and they were asking me how old I was and this and that, and I said to them, I'm old enough to remember when the Knicks were good, and they kind of were like, what? Wow, and and it's really been that long.
It's like when dinosaurs roamed.
Yeah, it's crazy. Now, to the other team that plays at the Garden, the Rangers. Listen, last year I'm a diehard Rangers fan. I'm a bigger Ranger fan than I am a Knicks fan. And last year was so much fun with this team. It was unexpected. They made the run. Shesterkin, we looked like we were lined up again with a goalie for another 10, 15 years. Now there's word that Gallant might be on the hot seat with Dolan's not happy. Drury might be on the hot seat. They might be sellers at the deadline. They're 12-10. They're kind of floating around mediocrity. Well, what's up with the Rangers?
Oh, good question. It's been disappointing for sure. And, it's similar to the Knicks. And I actually think the Rangers have been more disappointing than the Knicks.
Definitely.
Even though the Rangers are above 500, there are much higher expectations for the Rangers. Look, they're always in a tough division. The Metropolitan has been probably the toughest division in the NHL for the last 5 or 6 years. And now you add on to that the fact that the Devils are all of a sudden not only good, but great so far. The Islanders, and I think one of the things that helped the Rangers last year, the Islanders just had a year from hell. And they took a step back and they weren't a factor. So the hardest part about the Metropolitan division is being one of those top 4 teams and getting into the playoffs. Once they get into the playoffs, I still think the talent is in the room. I thought the other night against St. Louis was a really good sign. They fell behind a couple of times, and the game looked like it was following a similar pattern to other games recently, like when they played the Devils, like when they played the Blackhawks, like when they played the Bruins. The explosion in the third period was a really good sign. The thing that's concerning on the other end, though, is the play of the goal. Because he was so unbelievable last year. He was great his first year before COVID when they called him up, and he pretty much took the job from Hank. Look, goalies go through rough stretches. I think Shesterkin is in the middle of that right now. I think that, and the other part of this Rangers team is, you need to get more from your kids. I know it's fun to talk about the kid line and, oh, yeah, they're producing, they're a third line. But come on, one of these kids was the number 1 overall pick in the draft.
Yeah. Kako doesn't score.
Another one was the number 2 overall pick in the draft. These guys are in now their 4th and 3rd years in the NHL. These guys should be more than just third-line players who are kind of like a fun little group. These guys, and they've been fortunate because of the presence of Kreider and Panarin and Zibanejad and Fox and Trouba and guys like that. Those guys haven't had to, be the centerpiece of this team like the Devils have to rely on their former number 1 picks to do, and those guys are obviously fitting the bill right now. So they haven't even had that pressure or that spotlight on them. But eventually, you would like to see more from 2 guys who were picked at the very, 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 very top of the NHL draft.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, Panarin too. Panarin's, I guess, is getting older, and Kreider's getting a little bit older too. And if they don't start winning, they could be gone at the deadline. But I mean, you got Panarin's a -8. You got Kreider scores his goals. Now, my question to you is, why is Trouba the captain on this team? You're around the team. You're in the locker room. Trouba, he doesn't seem to be the leader. Kreider's the best. One of the best. He's the best goal scorer on the team. He sits there hugs everybody as they go in the locker room, gives them, he seems to be the leader of this team. Why did they choose Trouba?
Well, let me just qualify that by saying I actually haven't been in the locker room since before COVID.
Okay.
So which is essentially when Trouba got here. So I don't know Trouba well, but your point's a good one. And from what I know of Kreider, obviously the longest tenured Ranger, all of the examples that you just gave, I was surprised too. I thought, in my mind, you knew that they were going to eventually name a captain. I actually thought it would have been Mika ahead of Kreider, just because of the age. I think Mika stays with the franchise longer than Kreider, and you don't want to change captains all that often. But Kreider certainly would have been a valued pick as well. I was surprised that it was Trouba, but I don't know enough about Trouba to say that he's miscast. Obviously, Gallant and Drury saw something in Trouba that deemed him their choice to put him in that position. Now, I don't know that I would get all hung up and pinned.
It really doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter.
27 games. I mean, it matters, but I don't think that's the near the top of the list of the issues facing this team right now.
Yeah, there's no Messier on this team, so it really, it really doesn't
There's
matter.
not, no.
Too bad. But getting back real quick to the goalie with Igor, I thought the exact same thing that you did until this morning when I was looking up his numbers. His numbers are not bad. I think it just seems like he's playing worse. He's let in a couple bad goals. I was at the game, the Saturday game where they blew the 3-goal lead, and the third goal that he let in was terrible. And the Leafs came back with, you knew they were going to win that game once they got it tied up. We actually announced our baby announcement down that day, so I'm upset about I'm upset with the whole team for that one.
Congratulations.
Thank you. But Shesterkin's number, he's 11-4. He's got a 2.67 goals against, a 9.10 save percentage. They're basically on par with his first 2 years. It's weird. I was surprised when I saw those numbers.
Couple of things with Shesterkin. Number one, the expectations were significantly raised after what he did last year, probably unfairly. You now are surprised anytime this guy lets in a goal. The other thing is, think about the history of the Rangers' backup goalies going back to
Van Beesbroek?
2012. But no, I mean, just during the Hank era. With,
Okay.
Cam Talbot, Antti Ranta, Alexander Georgiev. Those are all guys who went on to become starting goalies in the NHL. Halak has not been great in that role as the backup. That has put a lot of additional pressure on Shesterkin that, okay, when you're out there today, you have to, Halak didn't win a game, or the Rangers didn't win a game until Halak's 5th or 6th start of the season. That puts a lot of pressure on Shesterkin, where in the past, whether it was Georgiev or whether it was Ranta filling in for Hank, you had a lot more confidence in your backup goalie, and there wasn't that feeling that, okay, well, we got our number one guy in tonight, we absolutely have to win. And I think that's affected his performance a little bit as well.
Yeah, and listen, the Rangers have a goalie deep history. Got a lot of those names up on hanging in the rafters are goalies. You got Jockerman, you got Richter, you got Hank now. Okay, so now let's see, real quick. Let's go real quick to St. John's. St. John's. They're 8-1 or something like that. They're second in the Big East. The conference play starts tonight for St. John's, actually.
Yep.
Now every year they're 8-1. They're like this every year, and then you turn around, you look up, and they're 2-6 in Big East play. What is this team? Is this a tournament team this year?
Should be.
Okay. Now what?
They play.
Okay.
They play defense. They play defense. They rebound the basketball. Soriano is one of the most improved players in the country. They had a tough one in Ames, Iowa, against an Iowa State team that's top 20, that had already been the number one team in the country. That's a game, I just wanted to see them be competitive. And they come out of the gates and they're down 22-5, and you're like, that's...
St. John's, that's St. John's, that's what that is.
The problem with St. John's, with this and really the absence of Champagny, you don't have that one go-to guy. David Jones, the transfer from DePaul, has done a nice job kind of filling that role. He's not Champagny, but Posh Alexander has really struggled shooting the basketball. Andre Curbelo is an extremely exciting player, and I think his role in this offense is only going to continue to increase as the season goes on. And then you have Soriano, who's averaging a double-double. He's averaging 14 points and 12.5 rebounds. And he's been beating up on mid-major competition. I'm very interested to see what Soriano does as St. John's gets into the heart of the Big East schedule. You got some, Sanogo at UConn is one of the best centers in the country. When he's going up against guys like that night in, night out, I'm very curious to see if he can keep up the same level of production. They got a lot of depth, though. They go like 6, 7, 8 guys deep. They're all around the same plane. They play a lot of defense. If they can take care of the basketball and if they can find enough scoring, then this is a team that has enough talent to make the NCAA tournament.
I'd like to not see them also playing on that Wednesday afternoon on the Big East tournament. Get that bye. But now it has a different, it has a different look now. Without Jay Wright, Nova, it looks like Jay Wright got out of there just in the right time. They look awful so far. Kyle Neptune.
Well, they've had some injuries too. They had, they don't have a full team yet.
So, and now I have a good friend who's actually a big listener to the show. He wanted me to ask you about UConn. He's a big UConn guy. He wants to know, are they a Final Four team? Are they possible have a shot to go to the Final Four?
I thought UConn had a shot to go to the Final Four last year. They have a lot of talent there. They just, they always seem to kind of stub their toe. At least last year, they were never able to find a lot of consistency. But Sanogo taking that leap now, he's unquestionably the top player on that team, probably the top player in the conference. I definitely think they're a team with Final Four potential. They should now assume Villanova's spot as the top team in the Big East for the foreseeable future, because Hurley's got guys. It's starting to resemble, as much as it can, it's starting to resemble the old days where you're bringing in kind of blue chip 4-star recruits, and they don't even have a spot for them in the rotation because you're so deep.
Okay, so that's good news. That's good news for our friend there. Now, why don't you tell people where they can find you?
You can find me all over. I work every single day. I'm on News 12 The Bronx, News 12 Brooklyn, Monday through Friday, 10 o'clock sportscast, obviously hosting Knicks and Rangers pregame, intermission, halftime, postgame coverage on 98.7 ESPN New York. A couple of college basketball play-by-play gigs for Fox Sports and CBS Sports Network mixed in. And you can often hear me hosting on ESPN New York, 98.7.
And he also sits right next to me sometimes at the Ranger games.
Those are nice seats that you have, by the way.
Yeah. It's actually my wife's, one of her, someone she works with, a customer that comes into her place of business. Those are his seats. We get like 10, 12 games a year. They're nice seats. I'll be there. I'll be there against the Devils. Yeah, they're great seats. I love it, and I love the speaker that I get that you guys have.
That's right.
I get to hear the penalties. Yeah, It's great. So, all right, you can hear him tonight. He'll be on the pregame for the Knicks. His name is Pat O'Keefe. Pat, thanks for giving us a couple minutes today.
Had fun. Thanks a lot, Bob.